A show created by the fans, for the fans. We are your home for Ohio State football coverage all year long. The Scarlet and Gray Podcast, a Network 216 production. Live weekdays on the Network 216 YouTube channel. Send us all your questions and comments on Twitter at VSG_podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Dalton, and Nick Leisure.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 46 of the Scarlet and Gray Podcast. I am Tyler Johnson, joined this evening by Mr. Jordan Dalton. JD, my man, this is going to be a different show that we are very excited for, to say the least. But how are you doing this evening, my dude?
I'm doing really well. We did get that big trailer drop today, so it actually ties in perfectly with what we're about to talk about. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, before we get to our guests that we're going to have join us this evening, as a reminder, guys, just take that quick second, drop that like on that video, subscribe if you are brand new to Network 216, as we are on the push for 3,000 subscribers. Can't get there without your help. Free to like the video, free to subscribe to the channel. So we ask for your support there. As always, the Scarlet and Gray Podcast and Network 216 is proud to be a partner of Homage Athletic Apparel. As a new customer at Homage, if you are new, just type in your email address, get a 15% off your first order on homage.com. Just enter your email address, subscribe to their email updates. You'll get 15% off your first order. There is no better place to get vintage athletic apparel than homage.com. And we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to go right in, bring in our guest, Mr. Matt Brown. He is the publisher of Extra Points. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
Fellas, I'm doing all right. It's been a very eventful week for me, even independent of anything video game related. As you might imagine, a lot of people want to talk to me after today. I'm going to do my best to be as helpful and informative as I can. There's a lot going on this beat for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, I kind of just want to start with really today. Did today's announcement going to the trailer, did this surprise you based off just other things that might have been able to take place this week? Or were you kind of expecting something like this to happen? Because it seems like there was a group that thought that there was going to be like some teams that were going to just be publishing some updates. And then we got just a whole update from EA Sports today.
Yeah, what I reported on Sunday was that individual schools were expecting to share an update, and what people on the licensing and the external operations side were telling me was that EA is going to make an announcement on Thursday, and all of these schools are going to make individual announcements in conjunction with that. And the thing that had been shared with me was essentially this is what the updated logo is going to look like. So that wasn't a surprise. And that schools are going to be sharing versions of that logo in their school colors to serve as some kind of confirmation that they're participating in the game. And I look at that and think, well, that's not really news, because I've been reporting every single FBS team is going to be in this game for like a year and a half, even if not everyone had signed the T's on the offer sheet immediately, but a lot of people are terrified of this. If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me if Notre Dame was going to be in this game, I wouldn't have to charge for newsletters. So all right, I got that confirmed from 3 different schools. 3 different power conference schools, different parts of the country. So all right, I feel confident in that information. We'll let it go. And then late last night, I got a text from a different school that I hadn't talked to that said, hey, I think EA is going to change things up a little bit. And we're kind of talking about how we're not going to release our update on Thursday. We might do it on Friday. We might do it late next week. And I couldn't get that confirmed with the other 3 schools I talked to. So that's why I didn't tweet anything, right? Mm-hmm. I will be honest. I was not expecting the commercial, the minute 30 long trailer that was coming today. The EA, I don't think, told any other reporters that was coming. I was expecting the logo update, the tweet banner change, and maybe like a 2-paragraph update. So that's a welcome change. I knew that they had been filming the commercial. I had seen, internet sleuths, sharing stills of the Rose Bowl when they were doing everything. So I was glad to see it. I think after the national championship game episode, what I'm going to kind of expect is that when EA or when schools that are working closely with EA are leaking something is coming, that they're going to try to under-promise and over-deliver rather than whatever happened 2 months ago. Because they recognize that as soon as like anybody says anything, whether it's me or Vanini or Marcelo or anybody else, that the internet hype machine is going to go turn up the expectations 40% no matter what. So maybe it's best for everyone to try to keep those expectations as low and grounded as possible.
Yeah. I was definitely glad we got a commercial, though. I mean, that's been like the biggest thing we've been waiting on for the last couple of years since they announced the game was being made. And so we finally got that news. And then last year when they decided to delay, one of the reasons they delayed was the NIL stuff.
See, that's the thing, though, that it really wasn't that. And this has been the popular narrative, and it's frustrating me a little bit. Like, the reason the game got delayed is because the game wasn't done. I think a lot of people who are less familiar with how big budget video games are made do not appreciate the fact of how difficult it is to build this game from scratch, because literally 0% of the code from the last college football game is usable in this thing. You can't just Control-C, copy paste the 360 version, Control-V, and like add Liberty and Old Dominion, right? Like that doesn't work. That was 2 hardware cycles ago. And I think, you had COVID in there, you had some challenges in staffing, and you realize like the company really wants to make a good first impression. So it's better to wait a year. The NIL licensing issues, like that wasn't gonna change anything. And even in the unlikely event that they weren't going to pay players, they were still going to make the game. They just were going to be missing 5 or 6 schools and have randomized athletes and no roster customization. That really wasn't the issue. So I kind of look at today, maybe I think from a different vantage point from a lot of fans, because there was nothing in the trailer today that surprised me. I have known the game's been coming out this summer forever. And it's not like I'm not the only guy saying that. The president of the company said that on an investor call. They've said this to Sportico. The company representatives have repeatedly said this in public over the last 6 months. But because EA as a company doesn't have a great reputation, and because a lot of people hate Madden, and a lot of people are just like trained to distrust anything these guys say, they weren't going to believe it until they got some kind of more visceral reminder. Even though the trailer didn't tell us anything about the gameplay, the trailer just told you, look, we're including stadium assets and mascots and vintage jerseys and all of these things I've been telling you we're going to be in the game for a year and a half. There they are. And like, you didn't have to believe me. Chris Vanini's been saying the same thing, and every other reporter's been saying the same thing. So I say all this, like, I'm glad you got the commercial. It was a cool commercial. It made me feel good. Anybody that grew up playing these games will feel good. I'm glad if that gives people peace. But like, it wasn't anything really new, which is fine. Like that, I think that's part of the communication gap here. And I'm like, hey, I think a small update's coming. To me, this is a small update, even though I understand a lot of other people don't feel that way.
It's a really good segue here. So Matt, there are people. I'm not, because I've been waiting for this game for so long. I'm buying it no matter what. I don't care what engine is used for it. I will be buying this game absolutely. There are fans, like, because I'm in a Discord that talks a lot about the game, a lot, like post updates and things like that. There are a lot of people that are worried that this is going to be an exact engine, like using the exact same engine as Madden. Are you worried about that at all?
No. So here's the thing about game development, right? Engine can mean a lot of different things. An engine is just like a directory, a database of software tools that allow you to replicate parts of development. An engine doesn't necessarily mean that a game has to look or act a certain way. I wrote a computer game. Like, if you go to my Extra Points, the newsletter, you can play a game called Athletic Director Simulator, which is mostly a text adventure. And that game, the engine that I used to produce that game is called Construct 3. Construct 3 is an engine that's mostly built to support 2-dimensional platformer games. Most of the games that people make on that look like Mario, or they look like Super Nintendo JRPGs. There are very few that look like mine, but you can build my game that way. The Unreal Engine powers like a quarter of all games that come out on PlayStation, and that could be anything from a shooter to a first-person RPG to a puzzle game to any number of things. The engine that's being used to develop the college football game is also used for golf. It's used for a lot of non-NFL games. So Jewish, you say this is frostbite. That doesn't make me think anything one thing or another, right? What's important are the developers, and what's important are the project managers, and what the company wants the game to be. I understand a lot of people don't like Madden, and I may not be the best vantage point for this because I don't really play Madden. I'm not an NFL fan. I play sports video games, but Madden is generally not the one that I play. So I am not the best use case to say if Madden is good or not.
Yeah.
But what I've been telling everybody is from the developers that I've talked to. I do talk to devs, not just comps people at EA about this game. Is that they understand that college football is a different sport than professional football. Not just roster construction and marching bands, and that one has Kent State and one doesn't, but in that the actual gameplay and rules and formations and animations have to be different. And the goal is to create this game to be different IP. That doesn't mean I'm guaranteeing it's going to be good. I haven't played the game, and I've played EA Sports games before that are good and some that suck. So this game might be bad. I hope it's not, but it might be bad. But if it is bad, based on the conversations that I've had and based on my reporting, I think if it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad because the game sucks. It's not going to be bad because the game's Madden or because the game is bad for the exact same reason that Madden is bad. It's different IP regardless of what kind of software architecture they're using for C# and C++ to make the game.
Cool.
So, sorry, JD. Go ahead, man.
So one of the big differences between this game and 14, obviously, different generations of game. But I know I keep touching on NIL, but NIL is obviously the big thing in college football right now, and we're seeing it with Ohio State spending a ridiculous amount of money to build their roster. How does NIL affect college football 25 in terms of name, image, and likeness for these players?
Yeah, I can't speak to the exact way that NIL, the transfer portal, will be a part of the game because those exact specifics have not been shared with me. And honestly, any specifics that were shared with me in October or November might not be the specifics in the most recent build of the game because they're constantly tweaking, right? The game's not out yet. But I can say on one hand, NIL is a thing insofar as the athletes participating in the game will be paid for their NIL, which is something that was not the case, obviously, for games before. And we could talk about what that means. But broadly speaking, what I would tell to anybody is that the developers want this game to be the most realistic depiction of college football as it actually is in 2025. And so that means that they've hired and they've paid reporters and paid coaches consulting fees and had them sign NDAs to help them explain how recruiting works right now. And obviously recruiting right now is much heavier on transfer portal than it was in 2014, where building a roster via transfers was very, very rare. But also the blood and guts rules of recruiting are different, right? We don't have a 25-man signing limit. We have multiple national signing days. And the biggest, most important one happens before the calendar season, sometimes before the season's actually over. We have more roster attrition, and all of those things I'm told, are part of the game. Just like RPOs would have to be part of the game, just like making sure the flex bone is part of the game, or making sure that marching bands are part of the game, because that's part of college football right now. Part of the playoff would have to be part of the game. But I don't want to speculate and say, you're going to have to press Y to drop a McDonald's bag on somebody to get them to commit, because I don't know exactly how that's going to look. It's fun to speculate, but I'm not going to sit here and get on Al Gore's internet and lie and say that I know exactly what that's going to be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean,
that helps.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So Matt, how long would you say, with NIL in college football, obviously that was a big reason why supposedly the game stopped producing, was trying to find a way to compensate the players. Once, is that really what determined this game coming back, or is there a lot more to it than just simply paying players to be in the game?
That's the single biggest thing. And EA has always wanted to pay the players, but the NCAA wouldn't let them. And then the risk factor in 2015, 2016, even before the O'Bannon decision was finished, was so high that schools were afraid to license their own IP for worry of legal exposure. And that was always kind of the rumor at the end of the last game, is Ohio State said, we're done. You can't use our stuff anymore. And then you don't have a video game if you don't have Notre Dame and Ohio State. I think Washington was one of the schools back then that was concerned. So after NIL legislation and policy changes kick in, that makes this more viable. We've had innovations in how intellectual property licensing on the school side works, and obviously the fact that the current generation of video game consoles is mature enough that anybody can get a PS5 if they want one at this point. Like, I don't know if you can afford one, but 2 years ago, we had supply chain shortages, right? You couldn't get a PS5. Like, me getting a PS5, when I did, it felt like I was buying drugs, because you couldn't just go to the store and get one because there weren't any, right? Not that I would know what it means to buy drugs. But so now you have a customer base that can actually support the hardware. You have the legal pathway that allows everybody to get their paid correctly and not be sued. That makes a college football game commercially viable. The math behind college basketball is different. Like, that was kind of that was a brand that was in trouble even before NIL.
Okay.
And there's a reason that that's not restarting at the same time. But for football, that's really the biggest reason.
It's interesting. Yeah, with college, I mean, I still have March Madness 10. Like,
Is that the one with Greg Oden? Or
no, that's
Blake Griffin.
That's 2K8.
10 is with Griffin, I think.
Okay.
I believe
The
Blake
EA
Griffin.
game. Okay.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if that ever comes back to, I mean, one at a time here, but I mean, I just turned 28. I might be 35 years old playing these games with my kids, and I really hope that's the case, because it's just the fact some of these games are coming back. It's really hard to believe. It honestly is. Like, I know JD. I was sharing with you guys, like, dude, the fact that we saw a trailer from this, I just couldn't believe it. Like, even though I know you've been saying things like that are gonna happen for just people like us, it's like,
I get it.
This is actually happening. Like, that's what's just crazy. Like, we've waited so long for this. We were in junior high playing this football game, and then it just went away, and now we're adults, have responsibilities.
Yeah. It's a different relationship, right? Because when the game ended the first time, I was already out of college. I think I was married, right? I'm turned 37 in a month. So the nostalgia is a little bit different. And I'm definitely gonna lie to my family and say this is for work when I'm just taking Akron to the college football playoff. But you can't see it in my office right now. But I have a TV on the other side here, and I've still got a 360 hooked up for the old game, which I fire up occasionally, even though the 360 is busted to hell and it sounds like an aircraft carrier, and I have no idea when it's going to catch on fire. I bought it for work and for content, but no. And yeah, I think if you are in your late 20s to early 40s, there is an emotional connection to this game that's different from other sports IP. And I think the only other group that's going to have a similar emotional pull to this are going to be the current athletes, the people who actually get to be in the game, because this was kind of held up as a totem for making it. And there, if you're a college football player now, you are young, you're old enough where you still played the game. You might have just stopped playing it when you were 10. And for a lot of people, that's going to be a bigger deal than any NIL check that you cash. Yes, the car dealer thing gave me more money, but all I really wanted was just to be in the game, man. And that will be a special thing. I would not be shocked to see some people crying when they get to play the game and see themselves for the first time. If I'm in this game, which is unlikely, but possible, I'm not going to be a serious professional about it. Are you kidding? I'm going to go online. I'm holy shit, I'm in a video game. I'm not going to be able to play it cool. And if I was a backup offensive lineman at Bowling Green and there I am in the game, number 62 overall, I'm not playing it cool either. That's a huge deal. You should be excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were kids, we had a couple football players that were older than us that went on to play D1 football, and we'd fire the game up, find them on the roster. Their name wouldn't be there, but it'd be number 5 for Michigan from Mansfield, Ohio. And we're just hey, there's Courtney Avery. That's awesome. And
I'm sharing that to his kids forever, right? He's pulling out the prehistoric PlayStation 2. I'm listen, this backup right guard here for Iowa, that was your old man. It says number 57. But and who could blame them? I would be doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. So Matt, before we talk about just before we wrap up and talk about just fun old college football games, one team that you have to do a dynasty with, or people should have to do a dynasty with in the new college football video game, any school?
That's a good question. So, I think you guys know this. I grew up in Ohio. I'm an Ohio guy. I don't live there anymore. And if you get a copy of this video game and the first thing you do is start a dynasty with Ohio State, like, you're a cop. I have nothing. I have nothing in common with you. I can't relate to you. And like, even I went to Ohio State too, but like, there's no fun and starting on the stacked roster. So I usually look, like most people, right? You look at the 1 and 2 star things. And so I'll look at the rosters and think, all right, am I in a better position to take Kent State for my first 2 years? Or should I take Akron? Or should I take Ohio because Ohio's uniforms are cooler and I partied there a couple of times as an undergrad? Or do we go with Akron because that's more fulfilling if you can make them better? I usually start with one of the MAC teams. And then I look at, okay, who's in a state that has recruiting upside? Who's got a fast quarterback, right? Because I do not know ball like many other people. I'm not great at, or I think it's even worse now when I get older, at reading coverages. So I'm like, give me somebody that I could just kind of like scramble out of the pocket and make one read, right? And simplify my life and kind of build up from there. So you're kind of looking at that'll be a fun experiment once we know what the rosters look like in April, to kind of sit down there and think, all right, I don't know if this team's going to be good in real life, but they might be really video game good, right? Like I'm thinking like Tulane from the last year or two, like I think would have been very good video game teams. Some of the Louisiana squads before Napier left to go to Florida would have been very, very good video game teams. Last year's UNLV, I think, would have been a really fun video game team. So, I'll have to kind of look back, come April after spring ball's over and figure out like, okay, who's got one good edge rusher, one fast quarterback, and one skill position player we can cheese. And we're just going to try to score 50 points and kind of BS and win that way. And that's who you fire up on the sticks.
Yeah, I love it. So, all right, Matt, let's take a trip down memory lane here. What was your favorite college football video game that you played? Like, it could be any year, any system.
I think my favorite one, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm old and my brain has been turned to tapioca pudding by being on this beat. But I think the ones that I have the happiest memories for were near the end of the PlayStation 2 life cycle. And so it would have been like either 08 or 09. And there were two things that were different about the late PS2 games that weren't so much a factor on the 360 or on the PS3. One was that they had FCS teams. Mm-hmm. They didn't have FCS stadiums usually. They didn't have some of the same assets, but you could play as Yale. And I remember growing up in like Lincoln County, like legitimately, I didn't know anybody that went to an HBCU in Newark. Right, or Pataskala in the late 1990s or in the 2000s, right? So this is my first exposure to Morgan State or FAMU or some of these kind of schools. I'm like, oh, some of this is kind of cool. These are cool uniforms. Kind of, you have some cool music and everything here. Should look into this when I get a little bit older. So that was a fun feature, and that's actually I've relayed this to many like ADs. They're like, yeah, this is why we would crawl in broken glass to get this game to come back. Because we can't buy that kind of marketing for another generation. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be falling in love with schools and teams that aren't in their immediate location. The other thing, which like you can't get away with this now, and I think even back when I was playing it, they're like, this is a little problematic. But like when you play the career mode, right, and you get better, and you look at your dorm, and your girlfriend gets hotter, depending on how good you were, right? So it's like you're with somebody that is. Not a 10 out of 10 necessarily as your freshman year. And by the time you're in the Heisman conversation, like, oh, this is a supermodel. And my dorm room is now suddenly, full of furnishings that I don't know how I could have possibly afforded without a $500 handshake here or there. And as a college student, you're like, well, this is funny. As a dad, now I'm like, I don't know if we could put that into a AAA video game right now. That feels sophomore. But 2008 was a different time.
So JD, I'll give mine, then you should give yours. For me, I'm staying on the PlayStation 2 as well, and it was NCAA football 06. And up until last year, when my wife and I moved, unfortunately, my PlayStation 2 decided that was it. But I would still play that game. The thing I loved about that game with Desmond Howard on the cover, I love the ability just to create a school so easily on the game itself. I mean, I probably created 20 different schools on that thing, and we do dynasty modes with them. But for me, I loved the fact that there were NCAA violations.
Yeah. You had to have like the discipline meter up. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I love that aspect of it because you always had to make sure you were keeping an eye on that, or you would get penalized by the NCAA. And then the recruiting aspect, I mean, you could send the hat. Like I joked when Ohio State was going after Caleb Downs, I actually took a screenshot from that game and said the Buckeyes are currently sending the house. Like that's awesome. Like I think, this game, I personally think it's going to be fantastic. But those are some things from the old game. I mean, if you could bring back, give me an NCAA violation, I mean, it would piss me off, but it would be absolutely fantastic. So,
I mean, it is important to know that unlike previous years, this game does not have an NCAA license. It's called EA Sports College Football 25, not NCAA 25.
Mhm.
Theoretically, that might make it easier to have that kind of feature and not have to worry about Charlie Baker tisking you. That is not me saying discipline violations confirmed. Don't you dare tweet that. I'm going to yell at you if you do. I'm just saying, yeah. God damn it! Like, but like that is you could see how you could intellectually you could kind of go down that road. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think for me, my favorite was 07, so the year after you, TJ, on Xbox. I did Reggie Bush on the cover. I played an ungodly amount of that game. My favorite thing about it was playing with Boise State, new field, and I just thought it was so cool. The field was blue, and then Idaho with their indoor stadium.
The Kibbie Dome, yeah.
I just thought it was really cool. I'd always, it would be like Ohio State playing, but I'd play them in Iowa. Or Idaho, and I just thought that was an awesome thing that they were able to bring that stadium into the game.
So it's funny. I'll real quick. I was actually in Moscow, Idaho, a couple months ago, and got a tour of the place from one of their associate athletic directors. And they're like, "We've really leaned into this. We play in a meme stadium. We know there's a bunch of dudes in their mid-30s. They're like, yeah, we love this weird airplane hangar of a stadium where there's like a concrete brick wall at the end of the field and it's a dome, but it's only 15,000 people. And we lean into that. And, he couldn't tell me if that's going to be the next game or not because FCS teams, my understanding, I've been told several times, are not planned to be in at launch, but there's going to be people that want that. It was kind of surreal to be there in person, because it just doesn't feel like any football stadium I've ever been in my entire life. Way surprisingly bigger than you would expect once you're on the ground, just because the roof is so dang high up.
Do they play basketball there?
No, they used to, but they just built a beautiful new, I want to say it's like a 3,500 seat arena right next door. It looks great. It's the complete opposite energy of the shot, right? Where it's like 6 times way too big than it should be. Idaho's like fine for like a mid-low major, but it's going to be loud because it's much smaller.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, Matt, we really appreciate you joining us this evening. We know you're very busy, but we want to give you a minute just to kind of let everyone know where they can find all the content that you produce.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I have accidentally become a video game reporter. And while I'm happy to write about this game, I'm just as excited about it as you guys are. It's not my real beat. Like my day job is not write about video games. Like there's times that people are like tweeting me like, "Hey, what's going on with NFL 2K?" Or what's happening? Can you get me unbanned from Madden? What's going on with NBA 2K? And I'm like, I have no idea. And I don't work for EA. My actual job is to write about the off-the-field stories that shape college athletics. So I write about business. I write about legal developments. Like today, the story that I wrote, it was a reported story where I interviewed many FCS athletic directors who are concerned about like the financial direction of college sports. I write a lot of serious stuff, even though I joke in these podcasts and I like to goof off on Twitter. But I also write about the video game. And I write about the video game because I found out this stuff by accident. Like I actually got the project proposal when I was filing an open records request to learn about beer. And like universities doing like licensed IPAs to raise money. And then, so I got all like the licensing information. And then I also got this project proposal. I'm like, whoa, this is way more interesting than beer. Throw away the beer story. We're pivoting to video games. which turned out to be a good business decision. So if you're interested in the coverage of the video game and future game projects and what that means from a business perspective and from the all of this at large, and if you're interested in any of the other off the field stuff, you can find it at extrapointsmb.com. There's two free newsletters, two newsletters that are free, two that are behind a paywall, which is how I can buy my kids Lunchables. And you can find me on Twitter at MattBrownEP.
Perfect. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you bet. Take care, fellas.
Thanks, Matt. Well, JD, as we're wrapping things up, my dude, that was so much fun. And just being able to go back and not only talk about this new game, but reminisce on it. A lot of fun, man. Like, honestly, probably, I mean, this is the 46th episode. Probably my favorite episode so far.
That's been awesome. I know we talk about it periodically on the show. We'll reference the game and more specifically NCAA football 14, just because that was the last game that came out. But yeah, I'm amped up. I know I bought my Xbox like 2 years ago in anticipation for this game, and so I'm just kind of been waiting on it. And one of the other features that we didn't really get to talk about that I really loved on Xbox, you could, and it goes with the assets he was talking about, but you could go in and you could I would take a USB flash drive and I would download songs, and then I would put like the bells tolling, and then you could put that USB flash drive in your Xbox, download that song to the game, and then you could put that in for like third down. So like when third downs hit, the bell was tolling in the stadium and stuff like that. I thought was really cool. And Matt actually has been posting these assets that teams have been sending in. Like Ohio State has they'll be doing Seven Nation Army on kickoff. They'll be doing the bells tolling on fourth down. They'll be playing like Hang On Sloopy on timeouts and stuff like that. And it is just like a really cool to see it coming to fruition. And I cannot wait for July is when they said the game's going to drop. So it's coming quick.
It's really coming quick. But again, shout out to Matt Brown for joining us tonight. Really appreciate his time. As a reminder, guys, drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you're brand new to Network 216. Coming up next, we are going to have, because again, we normally don't record on Thursday nights, but we do have a special edition. Legal Ham Radio podcast is going to be live here absolutely as soon as we're done, like literally. So make sure you guys tune in. They're going to provide you guys with plenty of laughs. You don't want to miss it. Only on the Network 216 YouTube channel. Talk to you guys all again probably in about a week or two, because we're going to enjoy President's Day and the time with our families. But we'll talk to you guys all again soon. And as always, go Buckeyes, baby.
Let's go. OH.